All right, let's jump right in. Today, we're going to explore a really powerful idea, something called applied optimism. And I'm willing to bet it's not what you think it is. This isn't just about being cheerful. It's something much, much deeper.
So, I want to start with a big question. What if every single problem we face, I'm talking climate change, curing diseases, you name it, what if every single one of them was, in principle, solvable? Now, not easy, for sure, but possible. Just keep that question in your head, because it is the key to everything we're about to unpack.
First things first, we've got to understand what holds us back. You could say that most of society is caught in what we'll call the error trap. It's this deep-seated fear of making mistakes, of getting things wrong. And you know what that fear does? It paralyzes us. It stops progress dead in its tracks.
Really, this all boils down to two totally different ways of looking at the world. On one side, you have pessimism. This is the view where errors are failures to be avoided at all costs. Institutions are just stuck the way they are. The future feels really fragile. And that whole mindset leads to, well, stagnation. But then you have the other side, optimism. Here, errors aren't failures. They're opportunities to learn. Institutions can actually be improved. And the future, it's wide open. This is the worldview that enables progress.
So, if pessimism is the trap, then what's the way out? Well, it's a new kind of optimism. And this is the central idea we're digging into today.
Now, this part is absolutely crucial. When we say applied optimism, we are not talking about just thinking positive or having a sunny disposition. It is not a mood. It's a practical strategy, and it's based on a hard physical fact about the nature of reality itself.
And here is that fact. All errors are, in principle, correctable. Just let that sink in for a second. This one sentence is the entire foundation for this way of thinking. What it means is that for any problem, a solution exists somewhere. The only barrier is a gap in our knowledge, something we just don't know yet.
So this brings us to a nice, clear definition. Applied optimism is the hands-on strategy of creating systems that are great at finding and correcting errors instead of trying to avoid them. You see, the goal isn't perfection. It's building systems that get better at fixing their own imperfections over time. Okay, this all sounds great in theory, right? But what does it actually look like in the real world? Let's take a quick tour and see how this idea shows up in some pretty surprising places. Let's start with the most personal system there is, our own minds. The pessimistic view is that people are just stuck in their biases, that they can't change. Well, applied optimism says, nope, that's just not true.
Think of it this way. A bias isn't some permanent flaw in your character. It's more like a bad theory about the world. And what do we do with bad theories? We criticize them, we test them with evidence, and we replace them with better ones. This means that no mind is truly beyond persuasion, and personal progress is always possible.
All right, now let's zoom out from our own minds to the grand story of humanity. We can apply this exact same lens to how we look at history. So instead of seeing history as just one long series of conflicts, we can see it as a story of knowledge creation. We can focus on the big problems humanity faced, these major bottlenecks, and the amazing solutions we came up with to get past them. You know, inventions like language and money, you can think of them as massive-scale error corrections. History becomes this incredible story of problem solving.
Now, you might be thinking this is all just for science and politics, but it actually applies to our creative lives too.
For example, there's this idea of cinematic optimism, making movies that are actually about solving problems, not just showing us another grim dystopian future. And then there's something called wonderism, which is the idea that beauty isn't just in the eye of the beholder, and our ability to create it can actually grow forever. It kind of treats aesthetics as a problem that we can get better at solving.
So how does this whole way of thinking apply to something as fundamental as, say, physics?
It really comes down to taking our best theories seriously as actual explanations of reality. So, for example, the pessimistic view on testing quantum gravity is that we need a particle collider the size of a galaxy. But the optimistic view, like the BMV experiment, makes a bold conjecture. Maybe we can test for it with technology we already have. The optimistic path is to at least try to solve the problem with the tools we've got.
Of course, we have to talk about AI. The story we hear most often is one of doom and gloom, right? The classic paperclip maximizer scenario. But what does applied optimism have to say about AGI?
Well, it flat out rejects those doomsday scenarios. This view argues that a true AGI won't be some mindless robot slave to its programming. It'll be a creative person, an entity capable of moral progress. Just like us, it will be able to correct its own errors, learn, and adopt better, more peaceful values over time.
So if this principle works for our minds, for history, and for our technology, how do we scale it up? How do we build an entire society around it?
And here is the key insight for building a better world. Fragile systems try to avoid mistakes, and so they shatter. But resilient systems, they're designed to correct mistakes, and that's how they grow stronger. The most successful societies aren't the ones that never fail. They're the ones that are best at fixing their failures.
And guess what? We've already got some of the best tools for the job. You can think of them as our society's error correction machines. Science uses experiments to correct bad theories. Democracy uses elections to correct bad policies. The market uses profit and loss to correct bad investments, and free speech uses open debate to correct bad ideas. All of them are systems designed for progress through correction.
Which brings us right back to where we started, with a question for you. Believing that all errors are correctable isn't a passive idea, it's a call to action. It invites you to look at a problem that everyone thinks is impossible and ask, what knowledge are we missing to solve this? So what uncorrectable error will you try to solve first?